Yeah, I know.
I got my grandson is 21 now. He's a freshman in college, and he finally decided he wants to be a commercial pilot. Well, they want $60,000 for him to go through the school.
Embry-Riddle?
Yeah. Well, they got a school up there in Alaska.
Oh.
Very good one.
Here come those black cats again.
Anyway, that's what
Well, that's neat. That's how did Russ did Russ go to airline school or?
No. Russ was going to medical school.
Really?
And he had a 94 average. We thought, well, he's going to make it to be a doctor. But one day he just called us up and said, I'm dropping out of school at the end of the term. I said, what's the matter? He says, well, they gave me an arm to dissect, and I can't do it.
Didn't like that, huh?
He said, I just can't do it. So I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, oh, I think I'll be a commercial pilot. I said, oh, you don't want to be a truck driver in the sky. That's what we told him. And he said, no, that's what I'm going to do. So next thing I knew, here he was pumping gas in Aurora. And one of my friends, Bosco, used to be in the club. He owned Vancouver Fast Freight. He said, why are you working here for $5? I'll pay you $9 an hour. You come over and work for me. So he went over to the truck depot, and they taught him how to drive the big trucks.
Yeah.
And his job was to back the trucks in. The trucks just come in and stop. The guys get out and said, here's your load.
No kidding?
So then he had to get the break off the rear 40-footer and then back the truck in.
That's the only hard part of that whole job. And they made him.
Anyway, he learned to drive trucks. Well, then the union finally came up and said, hey, you can't have this guy working here non-union. So Bosco had to lay Russ off. So then Russ started driving a truck for me, and he earned, what was it, $36,000 the first year. He was driving 6 days a week. And he spent it all on instruction, dual time. He went over to Pearson and got their twin, built a lot of twin time. Then he went to work for a building contractor, and I think he flew a Bonanza for a year for this building contractor. Well, then one of the guys that he had taken lessons with at Evergreen called him and said, hey, I just lost my co-pilot. I'm flying twin autos in Guam. If you get here in 3 days, you could be my co-pilot.
Just like that?
So he jumped on a plane, went to Guam.
What an upgrade.
Then for seven months, he flew that twin auto all around Guam.
Yeah.
Well, then he got another call from one of his other guys that he'd taken lesson with, and he said, Horizon's hiring in Portland, get here quick. So my son quit in Guam, flew home, and sure enough, he got to work on
That
flying.
Horizon didn't pay very well, though, I heard.
So anyway, he flew 3 years for Horizon. Then one day, another one of his Evergreen funny pilots said, Alaska's hiring, get up here quick. So Russ went up to Seattle, and lo and behold, he got a job with Alaska. Well, then he flew co-pilot for a year or two, and they said, we'll make you a captain if you go to Alaska and agree to stay 5 years. So he went to Alaska. Well, he's been there now 25 years, and he's now the senior pilot up there. And he's responsible for 75 pilots, and he gives them their 6 months annual on a simulator. But to do that, he has to fly every one of their 737s every month. So he flies to Chicago once, and then he'll fly to Hawaii, once to Mexico. So he flies every one of the 737s that he's training pilots on.
Wow.
Anyway, he went to Boeing and picked up the new airplanes. They picked up 15 new airplanes for this trip they're making to Hawaii. They're flying from San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle directly to Hawaii. And anyway, one day he he and I were at a cafe up in Anchorage, and I was waiting for my plane time to go to the depot. And this beautiful girl walked up to us. She was wearing a minimum bra and minimum shorts. Oh man, she was a knockout. You look at her in your old pulse. She come up and said, "Hey Russ, I understand you're giving me a test tomorrow." Russ looked at her and said, "Yes, you'd better go home and study because I'm going to be real tough." And it was one of the gals that the antique club financed.
Really?
Yeah. Well, he didn't know it at the time. Well, then later on, they laid off some pilots, and he had to lay her off. And then he rehired her again, so she's now again working for Alaska. But he never did know that she was the gal that the antique club financed.
What a good story. But you know what? I think you got to hire some gals in here to do some housekeeping or something.
Well, what happened, my wife got real sick. And for 2 years, or for about a year, 2 years, I didn't do anything out here. So you can see everything's a hell of a mess.
This is more than 2 years. But I love it. This is just the way I am.